maybe y'all just sit down for that. We were dancing in the back. Come on now. And go back one slide, because it's just, that was awesome. That is an Easter hat. Good morning. Out of the earth rises light, rises life, rises spring. May we join in the miracle that is springtime and enter with lightness and with joy. Out of the Spirit rises faith, rises hope, rises love. May we join with the miracle that is Easter time and enter into life with hope and love. Let us resurrect with spring. Let us resurrect with the Spirit and enter into renewed life as we gather for our time of worship together this Easter morning. Let us worship.
It's been a long, dark night, and I've been waiting for the morning. It's been a long, hard fight, but I see a brand new day dawning. I've been looking for the sunshine, gonna be okay. I can see the light of a clear blue morning. I can see the light of a brand new day. I can see the light of a clear blue morning. Everything's gonna be all right. It's gonna be okay.
Good morning, it's great to be with y'all. Good morning to you. Good morning, it says here, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Berkeley. I'm Smiley, and I will be your worship associate for today. We are a welcoming congregation, and we're always working on how to better welcome and care for one another. If this is your first time here, fabulous. And we're glad to see that you've come. And whoever you are, we welcome you in the fullness of who you are. As we begin, we want to acknowledge that this church occupies land in Huichin, the unceded territory of the Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. We understand that we continue to benefit from the seizure and the occupation of this land, and we want to acknowledge that. We acknowledge and embrace our responsibility to take restorative action, and we affirm this is a deeply felt and commit our congregation to be in the right relationship with indigenous communities, aligning in solidarity, supporting indigenous projects, and caring properly for this land. Let us kindle our chalice flame with these words by Dillman Baker Sorrells. For holy days in which we recall the old stories, we light the flame. For Passover, which reminds us of the courage and strength of those seeking freedom in the past, we light the flame. For Ostara, for Easter, which reminds us that love is our greatest challenge, we light the flame. For gathering days in this sacred space, we light the flame. For the opportunity to be together as a community and to remember the past and to plan for the future and to be alive in our presence. We also pause to remind ourselves of some of the foundations of resilience. With Reverend Michelle, we light the candle of courage, a candle of acts of service, a candle of fellowship, and a candle of hope. May we find and cultivate these foundations of resilience in ourselves and in one another. And now, please rise in body and spirit to join in singing our opening song. Jesus Christ is risen today. It's number 268 in the gray hymnal, and the words will also be on the screen.
Jesus Christ is risen today.
please remain standing and join with me in saying our covenant. Love guides this church. The quest for truth and justice is its common purpose. To give thanks, listen deeply, speak with care, honor our differences, and seek and grant forgiveness. These things we covenant with one another. Please be seated.
If you are not a body, are not a spirit, I invite you to join me on the stage.
Yay, all the friends. Yay. That just made all of my day. It looks so nice. Do we have room? We can scoot over. Yeah. Okay. One day, Jesus preached to the people from a mountainside. His disciples were with him, and they listened too. He said, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Jesus wanted people to love one another, but his message was hard. In the old days, he said it was often taught that you should treat others in the way that they treated you. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth was what everyone believed then. But my law of love says that if someone hits you on one cheek, turn the other to him as well. If someone takes your tunic, give him your cloak too. If someone forces you to travel a mile with him, go 2 miles. People used to believe that they should love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I am telling you to love your enemies and to pray for those who do you wrong. Don't make a show of doing good, blowing a trumpet as you go about it. When you give to the poor, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. It should be the same with your prayers. Some people pray in the streets so that everyone can see them. But the God you pray to is not seen. Go to your room and pray to him in secret. Your heavenly Father knows what you need, even before you ask him. Don't use a lot of words. Simply pray like this. And then they go into the Lord's Prayer. And I was taught the Lord's Prayer in Catholic school. And I could never remember it until I went to Catholic camp, and they taught me to sing the Lord's Prayer under a cave in the Shawnee National Forest. That's where I remembered the Lord's Prayer. And that's the Lord's Prayer that I want to share with you. So I'm going to sing it that style, line by line. If you feel led to repeat after me, please do. If not, that's fine too. Oh, here we are. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as in heaven. Please give to us all that we need, and lead us not away from you. For thine is the kingdom, and the power and the glory forever and ever. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Hallowed be thy name. And now all together. Hallowed be thy name. Beautiful. I feel like you were all with me back then. Jesus told the people not to worry about what might happen in the future. He said God looks after his children as he looks after the smallest thing he has made. Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, neither do they spin. And yet I say unto you that even Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. Amen. After service, we will have a spring festival for the kids outside in the field. We invite you to join us and to hang out with this beautiful Easter bunny up here. And there'll be a brunch that's happening in the social hall. And there also will be a gamelan music petting zoo in the fireside room, if you're wondering about that. So happy Easter, everyone.
Let us settle in, ground ourselves, and settle in for a time of meditation. First, a time of silence, followed by some words. So I invite you to take a few deep breaths, release them, settling into your space and your seat as we join now in a time of silence. Somewhere across the world, Easter is breaking. Not the Easter we may think of, with arms upraised and he is risen echoing from the canyons, but a much quieter, less dramatic Easter. Somewhere in the world, perhaps not this day, but someday soon, a woman and man will rise from their beds, shaking the sleep from their eyes, and find their children already awake and preparing for their morning prayers. There's been no gunfire, no drug wars, no yelling or shouting or screaming, only the quiet of the night and the peace of silence around them. And somewhere in the world, perhaps not this morning, but soon, a soldier is packing his duffel bag, has emptied out all of his bullets and changed into civilian clothes, coming home. For peace has long been established and there is no more need for his presence. And somewhere in the world, Easter dawn breaks over the earth, not only this day, but every day. And the familiar pulse in our veins throbs of peace, peace, peace. And now let us sing. The words will be on screen.
This reading is titled About Unitarian Universalism's Fourth Source, and it's by Kathleen Rollins. The living tradition we share draws from many sources. One of them is number 4, Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors and ourselves. Ms. Rollins tells us, our congregation sat in the silence in near darkness as each candle in the tenebrae service was extinguished. We felt the loss palpably as the story of Jesus' betrayal and crucifixion was told. Were you there when they crucified my Lord? Were you there when they crucified my Lord? And when those words rose to the ceiling of the chapel, Ms. Rollins tells us, our tears surprised and overwhelmed us. This service was on Maundy Thursday each year, and it attracted Christians and non-Christians alike. Members of both the congregation and the larger community were drawn to Unitarian Universalist settings to commemorate the life of one of the world's greatest prophets and teachers. The following evening, we gather again to participate in the annual Seder dinner, open to all, but especially to families who have a Jewish heritage. The reading from the Seder Haggadah is always led by a member who speaks Hebrew and who can remind the gathered of the sacrifices made by the Israelites many years ago for their freedom. The Seder ritual meal elements are laid out carefully. The matzah, the wine, the boiled egg, the charoset, bitter herbs, and a lamb shank. Candles are lit, and we feel the sense of great reverence as we go back in time to the very first Passover. Unitarian Universalists, Jew and non-Jew, sitting side by side at the table. After the dinner, of course, the children would look for the afikoman. Two great religions, Christianity and Judaism, are woven together in strands, and they compose the fabric of our faith. Both Unitarian and Universalism were Protestant traditions that understood themselves to be following the teachings of Jesus in a form unadulterated by centuries of Christian church traditions. Also, Jesus was a Jew, and the religion he taught arose out of Jewish stories, values, and teachings long before his followers developed it into a religion about him. Many Unitarian Universalists recognize the inadequacies of lumping Judaism and Christianity into something called the Judeo-Christian traditions. We honor the special place that both traditions hold in the history, our history, and in the current practice of many of our members. Even Unitarian Universalists who aren't very familiar with Judaism often find inspiration in the sacred Jewish texts, discovering fresh meaning and insight in them when explored within the context of the Unitarian Universalist community. In addition to sharing a Seder meal together, many Unitarian Universalists incorporate the Yom Kippur and Hanukkah observations into their worship life. Hebrew scriptures are read and studied and often are woven into the fabric of the liturgical year. Likewise, the teachings of Jesus and letters of Paul invite Unitarian Universalists into the insights available from a deeper relationship with the liberal Christianity. allowing the accretions of dogma that often surround the teachings of Jesus to dissolve. We see the fresh eyes and the essence of his message. We can resonate with the second half of his great commandment, cited from the Torah. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Though the Spirit of Jesus' message, through the Spirit of Jesus' message, we can claim him as a teacher, prophet, and guide, and freshly examine and call upon this source of our faith as one of the deep wells from which we draw.
When I started here at UUCB, in one of our first conversations, Brian asked me if I were the type of UU minister who talks about Jesus on Christmas Eve and Easter or not. Now, I find it totally amusing, and apparently y'all do too, that this question even makes sense to ask at all. But it does, and Brian has said it is one of his first questions to any UU minister. Some UU ministers talk about Jesus, and some avoid talking about him entirely. I'm in the former category, so we will indeed be talking about Jesus today. His teachings and example are one of the sources of our UU faith, actually two of the sources, the Jewish and Christian teachings and examples of prophetic people. Smiley just talked about the first of those. Because in fact, Jesus was a radical activist and encouraged the Jewish people to radically oppose the Roman occupation of their lands. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Y'all ready for that? Good. You may know that I got my undergraduate degree in mathematics, although I should have known something was up because even then I accidentally got a minor in religious studies, just because I was taking classes I enjoyed and those happened to add up to, and the religious study ones happened to add up to a minor. It was years later when I spotted it on my transcript and went, how'd that happen? One of my favorites of those was images of Jesus, both historical images and modern images, taught by New Testament scholar David Dungan. He is in a minority group of reputable New Testament scholars who think that the book of Matthew predated, the writing of the book of Matthew predated the writing of the book of Mark, not the other way around. And he himself declined a seat on the Jesus Seminar, a group of scholars who vote on whether or not they think something said in the Gospels about Jesus is historically accurate or not. But I digress. And of course, the courses he taught took a good look at the stories of Jesus, both biblical and otherwise, and at the contexts in which they happened. One of my favorite tools for this is Throckmorton's Gospel Parallels. Totally look it up sometime. It lines up the similar parts of the Gospels next to each other so you can look between them and see how they each talk about something. We're going to be focusing in on one set of verses today, which will be up on screen in a second. And for our Jesus fans in here, these are all words in red in the Bible, meaning they are all words attributed to Jesus himself. Can we get them up on screen? There they are. These are from Matthew chapter 5, from what is called the Sermon on the Mount, which Heaven was talking about earlier. You've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. But if anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Now, I'm guessing that most of us, if not all of us, have heard some version of at least one of these bantered around in general society, right? All right. And they're usually taken to mean some sort of passivity or idealism, of extending oneself beyond what is asked, or of letting one be walked over like a doormat. But that couldn't be further from the truth in terms of what Jesus was actually saying. So let's dig into these. First, context is everything. Jesus was a Jew in first century Palestine. At the time, it was ruled by the Romans, and everyone would have been well aware of the unsuccessful, violent rebellion of the Galileans 20 years previously, who had tried to fight against the Romans. It was a time of oppression and fear, and the Roman occupiers were definitely seen as the evil ones. Now, the written versions of the Gospels came about later as well, even later than the time that Jesus' life is put at. Many scholars put the writing of Mark around 65 to 75 in the Common Era, and the rest later. Although, as I mentioned earlier, some scholars flipped that and put Matthew first, but in the same time frame. Another piece of context is a major war against Rome happened in the years 66 to 70. See how that lines up exactly with when the Gospels were actually put down in writing. And it was filled with its own horrors and backlash. So both during the time of Jesus himself, as well as during the time his words were recorded, violent resistance was not seen as a viable option to encourage. So let's take this phrase, do not resist an evildoer, or as many translations put it, resist not evil. Now, that's actually not an accurate translation of the Greek. That translation that you're seeing there actually dates back to the King James Version, done by court translators under King James of England. Now, King James certainly would have wanted the words of Jesus to encourage submission to the monarchy, no matter what, and he was literally in the position to be able to put words into Jesus' mouth in that regard. And since then, translations have used similar words. But that's not what the Greek meant. Resist not evil comes from the Greek word antistene. That word doesn't mean resist. It specifically means violently resist. So what Jesus really was saying was do not retaliate against violence with violence. See how that says something completely different? At the time that Jesus was living, there were two options that people could see when faced with violent oppression: fight or submit. And the people of Jesus' time knew quite well the result of fighting, and they also knew what happened to those who supported the fighting. That insurrection that had happened 20 years ago, those who had aided the fighters just north of Nazareth had literally been sold into slavery just for helping. Jesus was an activist, but he wasn't encouraging violent resistance. But he wasn't advocating for passivity and submission either. He was laying out the framework for nonviolent resistance. So let's talk about these three examples he gives here, which are just beautiful examples of this third way of nonviolent resistance. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other also. All right, so let's talk about this. If someone's going to slap you on the right cheek, they're probably facing you and they're hitting you with their right hand open-handed, right? That makes sense. Jesus says, turn the other cheek. All right, so now there's a whole set of problems going on when someone does this. So one option, if they turn the other way, would be to smack them open-handed with your left hand. But let's think about context. This was not socially acceptable at the time. The right hand was used for just about everything, and the left was reserved for, shall we call them, unclean matters. According to the Dead Sea Scrolls, even gesturing with one's left hand earned you 10 days penance. So just imagine touching someone's face with that poopified left hand, if anybody didn't get exactly where I was going. Now, I admit us southpaws were just out of luck at the time and had to learn how to use our right hands. So switching to the left hand was completely out of the option. So now we're stuck with the right hand and that turned cheek. With the target's face turned the other way, the only options are a backhanded slap or a fist. These are problematic also. A fist is only used on equals, and the backhand is reserved as a way of admonishing inferiors. So if somebody slapped you with an open hand, they're not going for either of those. By your forcing them into the situation, you're robbing them of the power to humiliate and turning the tables over. It challenged social conventions and hierarchies that were very deeply set into society. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Did you think about it that way before? So let's do another one that's even better. You ready? Okay, so we got this line about the cloak. If anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak also. Now, only those who were extremely poor had nothing but their outer cloak to offer as collateral for a loan. Now, Jewish law, when it was offered as collateral, required that cloak to be returned every evening at sundown so they would have something to sleep in. Compassionate, right? Okay, other problems there. But when it came time for the loan to be due, if they couldn't pay it, then they could be sued for permanent possession of that outer cloak. Now, what Jesus is talking about turns the tables on this process, turning it in from a moment of humiliation for the person being sued into a moment of ridicule for someone who is literally going to sue someone else for their cloak, for their clothes, the last thing that they have. What Jesus is saying that the translation doesn't quite capture is that if you're sued for your outer garments, give them your undergarments too. In other words, walk out of the courtroom stark naked. Look, you can take everything, but you can't take my body from me. Now, under Jewish law, it is forbidden to look on nakedness. And the punishment, though, wasn't on the person who was walking around naked, who had literally just been sued for everything they own. The punishment went to the people looking upon the naked person. See how that turned the court on its head totally? Jesus is turning an oppressive reminder of poverty into a spectacle that pokes fun at the entire system. As far as nonviolent resistance goes, this is brilliant. And by the way, now you can go home and say you went to church on Easter and talked about naked Jews. All right, let's talk about this second mile business also. This is perhaps one of the most widely misunderstood and misused things that Jesus says. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the second mile. Now, you're already with me that this probably doesn't have anything to do with what it sounds like it says, right? It doesn't have anything to do with making extra effort, giving more of yourself when someone asks you to, or all that warm, mushy stuff. Now, Jesus couldn't exactly say who he was talking about in this one, or else the Romans would have immediately labeled him as an agitator and taken action. But everyone listening knew exactly who he meant. He didn't mean if anyone forces you to go 1 mile. He meant if a Roman soldier forces you to go 1 mile. It was standard practice at the time for Roman soldiers to be able to order any member of the populace to carry their pack. We're talking about 65 to 80 pounds worth of military gear they were carrying. It was seen as an acceptable way to remind the locals of who really ruled them. But there were limits to it. This is compassionate ruling, right? Lest the local population feel too much oppression and just completely snap and rebel. So the soldiers were allowed to demand someone carry their pack for no more than 1 mile. There were actually mile markers along the roads to make sure that they wouldn't violate this. A soldier breaking this limit by demanding more would be held accountable under Roman law himself. Enter Jesus' form of nonviolent resistance. Soldier asks you to carry their pack? Great. You get to the mile marker? Offer to keep going. Insist on it, actually. What's the soldier going to do? They'd rather not carry their pack at all, but they sure don't want to get into trouble for having asked the locals to do more. Think about how it might play out. You'll get to the end of the mile, and the soldier grudgingly reaches for his pack back. Hey, don't worry about it. I've got it for the next mile, too. No, give it back. No, I've got it. And you keep on walking. The soldier's now faced with having to chase you and beg for their pack, or fight you for it, or be caught doing something illegal. Isn't that brilliant? You've taken this oppressive law and thrown it back into their face, making this utterly ridiculous situation they're stuck in. This is some of the most brilliant nonviolent resistance. I'm betting Jesus had a lot more examples and strategies, but these are the ones that got canonized when everything was written down those many years later. Jesus was teaching the third way of resistance, not violent resistance and not passive submission, but active, nonviolent resistance. And he modeled it other times too. When Jewish lawkeepers brought him the woman who had committed adultery and asked him about applying the well-known Jewish law of stoning her for this act, he replied that the one who had never sinned should be the one to cast the first stone. And of course, as that story goes, none of them could say that they were without sin and dropped their stones and left the woman unharmed. Instead of outright challenging the law, he subverted it, turning it back at those who were demanding that awful law be applied. So why are we talking about this today, aside from the fact it is some pretty cool stuff about Jesus? I think it is important for us Unitarian Universalists to talk about prophetic voices in our heritage, and especially to talk about Jesus. And not only because Jewish and Christian teachings are part of the sources of our faith, as Smiley was sharing about earlier, but I've seen many UUs to have a bit of an anti-Christian orientation. And I get that. I really do. I grew up conservative Christian myself, Southern Baptist to be specific, and experienced so many of the oppressive things that were applied to me in that faith. But that doesn't mean that we should throw out all the wisdom and voices from the Christian faith. It is an excellent practice for us as Unitarian Universalists who say that we respect the wisdom from many of the world's religious traditions to make a point of seeking out that wisdom and finding ways that we can embrace and celebrate it. That's why I'm talking about Jesus the way I am today. Jesus was a radical Jewish teacher who iterated and reiterated some great lasting principles for the Jewish people, which in turn inspired many others. Even if you may have unkind memories of a Christian past, or even wounds, I hope that you've heard something today that you can appreciate. And for those of you who do celebrate Jesus and his work, I hope you heard some things today that were exciting for you. So, happy Easter, happy Jesus Day, happy Ostara, happy Passover, and happy spring.
And I have a happy thought. Some good news and some less than good news. The good news is that the congregants in this church have plenty of money. The less than good news is it's still in their pockets. Okay. It says here that we are inviting you to make an offering. In this way, each of us has the opportunity to contribute to keeping our community dynamic and resilient. We're continuing to conduct the offering without passing the plate. Instead, you can give electronically by scanning the QR code on the back of your badge, or you can put a cash or check donation into the donation envelope that you'll find in the back of the pew in front of you. Write your name on it. Don't forget to write your name. And mark offering plate or pledge, and then put it into the donation box beside the fountain in the atrium as you leave the sanctuary. Each week, half of the offering plate is shared with a nonprofit Good Neighbor organization recommended by our Social Justice Council. We're grateful that you've continued to practice generosity with UUCB and our good neighbors throughout these very difficult years. Your offering of any value is always received with gratitude. The Good Neighbor for this month is the Women's Center, the Women's Cancer Resource Center. And the Women's Cancer Resource Center improves equitable access to cancer information, support, and care. They help women with cancer improve their quality of life through education, supportive services, and practical assistance. They serve people with any form of cancer from all backgrounds, economic levels, and ethnicities. Their clients include people with new diagnoses, people in remission and survivorship, people living with metastatic disease, and those receiving end-of-life care. Thank you. Please join me in dedicating our offering. We dedicate our offering and ourselves to the mission of this congregation, to create loving community, inspire spiritual growth, and encourage lives of integrity, joy, and service.
This has been such a beautiful service, has it not? The music has been exquisite. Eric, thank you for your trumpeting today. And Katie, your solo was so gorgeous. And thank you to all of the other musicians that have brought together this exquisite musical Easter Sunday morning. And there's other cool stuff to talk about too. There is a spring and Easter festival after the service. I think there's some Easter eggs of some sort happening outside. I think there might be a jumpy house for those who are so physically inclined. And let's not forget the gamelan instrument petting zoo. Those are Javanese musical instruments. I can't wait to touch them. I've wanted to for a while. So that's in the fireside room. So please stay and have a great time. There will be a Passover meal on Thursday, and is there still time to RSVP? Okay, I'm hoping there is. Look in the week ahead, which came out on Friday, for details. And and thanks for all who've worked to put that on. And then I heard a little bird told me that next Sunday there might be a very exciting announcement from your ministerial search committee. So make sure to tune in. That's next Sunday. Let's finish out with some more music. What do y'all think? Please rise in body or in spirit. Lo, the day of days is here. It's 269 in the gray hymnal. The words will be up on the screen. For all those who may celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, may this be another affirmation of divine love and promise. For all those who see the eternal story of new spring and life beginning anew, may you breathe deeply a season of promise and hope. For all who are experiencing despair or hopelessness this Easter, may you find in the darkness or depression a doorway to light and warmth that offers you freedom. And for all of us, together we can do what no isolated person can do. Rolling the heavy stone aside reminds us we are far more powerful than we could ever be on our own. Let us begin in love. May it be so, and blessed be.